Hey there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we say is that Max brought up the wrong slide. But one of the things that we also say is a few important things you should always remember, and everybody should learn this, including every atheist and every self-styled skeptic. If you want to be better, you're going to learn a lot in this episode, because skepticism is always arbitrary. It is not inherently honest. It is not even inherently coherent. Skepticism often just makes you feel smarter than you really are. It can be useful, but we'll get into the limited uses of skepticism throughout the show. So if you like the kind of work we do here, please do find us on redpillreligion.com. In days of social media censorship, we're pretty sure this website is where you'll find us if this channel disappears. We are on our third channel after all. We've been chased out all over the place. Please drop a note in the PayPal or Bitcoin buttons, or join us on Subscribestar, which we really appreciate, or buy some of our merchandise. We got shirts, we got mugs, we've even got original art from members of the crew. So check that all out on redpillreligion.com. Also, since it is again Monday, joining me as per usual is raconteur, author, lawyer, philosopher, and guy with a big beard named John C. Wright. Say hello, John.
Good evening. I just had my beard trimmed, so it's now nice and presentable.
His felt Ryan Gosling beard. Okay. Okay. So
I don't know who that is. It's beyond. That's after my time.
Oh, just some 40-something douchebag in Hollywood. Please also be sure to check out sci-fi-right.com, where you will find a lot of his work. Please be sure to click on the works link to buy his books, many of which are award-winning and award-nominated and highly praised and received. You can buy them on Amazon, or you can get them there. Word has it, if you buy all his books tonight, he will write you a sonnet. What else you got going on the blog this week, John?
If you'll scroll down, you'll see the next episode of Lost in the Last Continent, which is now steamrollering toward its a thrilling climax. In less than I do chapter a week, and so I've only got like 6 to 10 chapters to go. So sometime in about the Midsummer's Day, I'm going to hit the climax, hit the end.
And just so everybody knows, Lost on the Last Continent is a free sample so that you can sample Mr. Wright's writing style. And boy, we got some noise in the background there. In any case, yeah, please do go check that out. Click on the works link to buy his stuff. Also check out eljajilamplighter.com to see Mrs. Wright and her work. And let us go ahead and begin. Now, this week we're going to talk about skepticism. Hey, Dad, you've got people who want John Wright's attention there at the house, apparently, and I think he just muted himself out. So I'm going to do a little bit of a rant here and explain that we're going to talk about skepticism and why skepticism has become a phony religion that has been tricked into a lot of people, trained into a lot of people, indoctrinated into a lot of people. Because the reality of skepticism is not what most of you think it is. Before we get there, we did have some real fun last week. John and I, having both once been atheists for decades.
One of the healthy uses of skepticism is to produce doubt for April Fool's Day tricks.
That's right, and we actually had fun. One man claimed that we strawmanned atheism. How I don't know, but he does give. He does give a few examples. He gives a lot of rationalization. I don't know. I wonder if we should just read it. It's an awful long thing. He claims that atheism is simply the practice, state, or position of a skeptic who suspends the acknowledgement of the existence of gods until credible.
Negative. That's usually the word agnostic is used for that position.
That's correct.
Atheist is someone who asserts as a positive truth that there is no God. Or that if there is a God, and he is the way he's described in the Bible, he is unworthy of our worship and devotion. Either one of those two could be described as an atheist.
No, not at all. Those are both agnostic positions, or even...
No. If you say positively, I know as the truth there is no God, that's atheist. If you say there is a God, but he's not worthy of worship, that's also called atheism. That's a rare position. That's more like the Satanist position.
Yeah, I suppose so. And
Now,
he also,
the reason why I laughed, even without reading his rather long letter, is because I didn't say anything I haven't heard some atheists at some point say. Now, the atheists don't all agree on all their other points, nor were we trying in our mockery to make it look as if they were. We were merely repeating things that we'd heard atheists say. And honestly, I've never heard of a libertarian who believes in eugenics the way I was saying that I did. But I've heard libertarians who were atheists who talked about man as if they owned themselves and as if they were beholden to no higher power. And I've heard lots of people talk about eugenics. It was a very popular concept back in the 30s among the science fiction authors I read. And they all certainly thought that man was not meant in the image of God, but was a plastic thing that could be improved. So I'm sorry. The joke of me putting together two opposite things might have been absurd to him, but the absurdity didn't come from me. The absurdity comes from when you throw out God, you end up throwing out things like aesthetic theory, ethical theory, the theory that the ontological theory that logic is a real thing that exists independent in and of itself, and on and on. So
here he gives a few claims that are straw men, and I don't know how much to give this guy, because you're making a lot of noise there, John. I wonder if there's something up with your mic.
I can't. I don't hear anything. There's nothing in my environment making any noise.
We'll have to see if it just keeps going. He claims that, let's see, he says, atheism doesn't avow that our universe is random and causeless. Both of these are obvious triggers to falsely claim atheism is purposeless, or that another's religious experience is unmeaningful and nothing more than a dream. Atheism simply suspends the belief that God. Sorry, sir, but you're still describing an agnostic position. You are not.
And besides, and he's just misinterpreting the comment. If a religious person says an atheist says that nature is blind, we don't mean there's no logic to nature. We just mean it's not intentional. There's no mind guiding the processes of nature. They're mechanical.
Right, and they just
that doesn't mean random. That means that doesn't mean random in the sense that we can't anticipate what's going to happen. That's one meaning of the word random. It means random in the sense that it's not deliberate.
Right.
So he's just playing a word game there.
He is. He also says, and actually he plays another word game, because he says, he quotes it as a straw man, us saying that the only thing we can truly know is to not know anything. We never said that. What happened, sir, and you clearly were not listening, as it was repeated, is that an atheist said to us, and I have heard this from many atheists, so it is not a straw man, said the only thing we can truly know is that we don't know anything, or that we can't know anything.
Yeah. The only truth is there's no truth. And
that is a common atheist trope. I've heard it out of countless of them. I even said it back in the atheist days.
It's watered down. It's watered down Nietzsche, or what it is, by the way, if you want to segue, is it's overblown skepticism. It's gullibility disguised as skepticism.
Yep. What? He gets us on one, because and this is easy, because we were joking, but every war in this universe was caused by religion. I don't know if that's a direct quote.
However, no. Of course not. We're exaggerating the claim. The claim is that many or most wars are caused by religion. The actual religious wars that weren't based on something like a land grab or an affair of honor or fear of attack is relatively small.
Yeah,
with one exception for one religion of peace that will go unnamed.
Even then, in fact, Vox Day and others have done extensive analyses of these. Even if you throw the Muslims in, all religions put together don't come to even a fraction of all the major conflicts that we have seen in the world. Not well under 5%. It's ridiculous. Add in the Muslims, and you're still at under 5% of warfare that you could put in for the Muslims. And the Muslims, by the way, can defend themselves on at least some of it. The bottom line is, though, it is a huge atheist trope these days that religion has been an endless cause of wars throughout history, and in fact, that's commonly said by atheists, and it is a common lie by atheists.
Now, if he's going to call that a straw man argument, he's merely making a category error. He's mistaking humor and exaggeration for a philosophical claim. No one here claims to know the cause of every war in the universe since the beginning of time. Nor did I ever hear any atheists say that the Spanish Inquisition killed 90 trillion people. Of course there's exaggerations because their claims are ridiculous, and we're showing the ridiculousness by exaggerating them. It's not a philosophical debate. It's a fun session. It's a mockery.
A mockery that cuts really too close to home, because now he's not even getting it. Like, he quotes us as saying, "Science proves that nothing but science is correct." I'm sorry, once again, sir, you are deliberately misunderstanding or obtuse. People in your religious movement, i.e. the atheist movement, the skeptic movement in that, frequently claim that science has proven there's no need for God. Science, and frequently claim that science is the only way we can know anything. I've heard that out of countless atheist mouths, including many very well-known and prominent ones these days, that science is really the only way we can know anything. It's true.
Including the philosopher David Hume.
Yeah,
I mean, this is not an obscure claim that we're making up out of our heads.
Actually, I'm going to defend Hume. You're more educated than mine, but isn't Hume the one who ultimately concluded that reason and science themselves were also not reliable?
No, that was Kant.
Okay.
Hume said that nothing could be known except by means of empirical knowledge. And as far as I know, he never addressed the paradox presented by the fact that that claim is itself not verifiable empirically. He recommended playing backgammon and relaxing and not worrying about the problem.
Let's see. He quotes us as saying, "You see, I believe morality is to be based on science." Countless atheists do, sir, including Sam Harris. This is why I believe in genetics. I believe it would improve the human race by breeding men and women like dogs, the same way we improve dog breeds. Many atheists have expressed this, and they do so. It's almost always.
Is he unfamiliar with the 20th century?
Yeah,
Was I the only one who paid attention to what happened during the bloodiest century in all human history? Eugenics was one of the main drivers of the National Socialists of Germany.
I'm gonna go to one last one, and then one other.
Oh my goodness!
And then we're gonna move on, because this is what's typical of responses these days. He says, the stuff on eugenics. He says it is absolutely horrific and bigoted to attribute thoughts like this to those who are merely skeptical concerning the existence of gods, sir. That makes you an agnostic. If you're merely skeptical, you are merely agnostic, not an atheist. That's number one. Number two, you are simply lying to yourself if you think this sentiment is uncommon among your religious kind. And believe me, we don't. None of us here believes you are not a religious movement, sir, because you are.
And number three, if there is no law above human law, if there is no divine law to restrain the ambitions of man, then the law is only whatever men say it is. And if a group of men in Germany or elsewhere who don't believe in God say that the law is that we can breed men like dogs to improve the species, Darwin should smile on them. Your Darwinian worshipping religion should smile on them. It's not the theists who think that Darwin was writing a tract on ethics. I've heard that from the atheists who think that the genetics, the selfish gene, can explain altruistic behavior and approves of it. But of course, Darwinism doesn't approve of altruistic behavior or any other behavior except for fecundity and survival of the fittest. It's fecundity and longevity. And you can't, and either you can deduce a moral system from that, in which case you're going to get something very similar to Nietzsche, or you cannot deduce a moral system from that or from any empirical basis, in which case science doesn't explain even the honesty you need to be a scientist. So either way you have it, either way you want to play the game, sir, you're still boxed in. You're still scrod.
Let me go ahead and invite Mike to come onto a stream here, if he can, because he makes a lot of aspersions at us too, and says all we do is mock people. I'm sorry, you're in the religion that mocks anybody, mocks people for sky fairies and imaginary friends and invisible unicorns. You are in a group that routinely...
Wait. He's accusing us of mocking people on an April Fool's Day trick where we set out to mock people?
Yeah, including ourselves even. Right.
Okay.
Okay. So, in conclusion, I'm going to end quoting him here. Again, he had gone on about how skepticism is merely suspends the acknowledgement until critical evidence, blah, blah, blah. He says, why this is going to be a good segue into the subject of skepticism. Why this position of skepticism, which is a truly natural and rational behavior, is such a threat to some theists, and some of those proposing supernatural realms, such as represented by red pill religion, is so mind-bogglingly irrational. Sir, skepticism is natural behavior. It can be rational behavior. It can also be
a neurosis. It can also be a neurosis.
Huh?
It can also be a neurosis or even a psychosis.
Yes,
if I'm skeptical as to whether or not I know how to breathe or whether or not I exist at all, if I'm a solipsist and I'm skeptical about the existence of other consciousnesses, of other people, that's crazy town. Okay, so it's as natural as murder. It's as natural as the sex act. Both those things are natural, but both have abuses and uses.
Now, I've given a link, and I'll show it here briefly. I'm not going to read the whole thing. There's a very good, easy, free reference article on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which obviously is going to be credible, which goes into all the various ways to do skepticism, all the types of skepticism, all the schools of thought of skepticism, and by the way, fully acknowledge that it is an open question, as it has been for thousands of years. It is still an open question in philosophy if you can learn anything at all through skepticism, or come to know anything at all through skepticism. It's an open question. Because I'm going to repeat what I've said before. In short, there's various, sophisticated ways of doing this. The shortest way of putting it is that to be skeptical is to cast doubt on a proposition. The end. That's it. That's what skepticism is. If you want to get more fancy, I would say that every time you are skeptical, go ahead and check yourself on this. You are either suspending judgment and refusing to come to a conclusion, or you are assuming that whatever you already think is correct is correct. If there's a third, I want to know what it is.
There's a third use of skepticism, which is the honest use, which is in a debate, one party representing one side asks the other side to defend their axioms and assumptions. They're unquestioned assumptions. Its use is to uncover things that you thought you had justified, but maybe have not been justified.
Mm-hmm.
That's its real use. As a professional philosopher, and I say professional because I've actually been paid for it at times, for the worthless act of doing philosophy, of asking why, ask why, and asking why. All human thinking is based on assumptions, and those assumptions are based on deeper assumptions. Now, it obviously can't go all the way down. There are certain assumptions that are hidden in the very bottom of our mind that are irreducible, that you can't actually ask a rational question about, such as, is it true that there's no truth? That's not a rational question. You assume you have to assume there's truth in order to ask the question at all. Okay? So there are certain irreducible things that skepticism can't erode. But that doesn't, I should say, honest skepticism. A dishonest skeptic, he can say, you can't prove to me that truth is true. Those words can come out of his mouth, and during the course of the conversation, he can even pretend he believes it. He can shake his head no every time you say something, like a character in a Monty Python skit. Okay, but the actual honest use of it is to say, how do I know that this is the case? The difference between the modern approach and the ancient approach, and I'm a big fan of the ancient approaches, when Aquinas or Aristotle asked a question, he did it within the context of what he and his audience both agreed on as true. They were asking questions about how it actually worked. The modern idea that you can get to an absolutely objective reality by rejecting every piece of information in your brain and take a stand in the middle of nowhere and believe, and from nothing, build up a system or a model of the universe that coheres to the universe. That's nonsense. I mean, no, that makes no sense even on its own terms, because the assumption that there is a universe, that you can build a model of it, that skepticism is a proper tool for finding out what is indubitable, and so on and so forth. Those are all assumptions that you have to have in order even to use skepticism properly.
But
the dishonest usage of skepticism is exactly what you said. It's a guy wrapping himself in the flag of being a philosopher who is not doing any philosophy at all, who just says, well, I doubt that this man existed in 2,000 years ago. I doubt that the things said of him are true. I assume, unasked and without looking at the evidence, that all the evidence is false. I presume that I can make up a view of the universe that's coherent without relying on the supernatural. I presume I can get a conclusion without an assumption. I presume that I can make A equal to not A if I just try hard enough, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And this is worth talking about a good deal more. Oh, there's a website I'm talking about here. I was going to bring it up later. I might as well bring it up now. There exists a group of ideologues, frankly, mostly associated with the Frankfurt School in one way or another, well, first off,
for your listeners who don't know, the Frankfurt School is commies. They're the people who infiltrated our society after World War II and tried to successfully eroded our major beliefs in our ethical decency that America once had.
Although they're really to be found in I don't know why we call them Frankfurt, because they're mostly in the United States and in places like Columbia, where Richard Carrier comes from, and University of Chicago, and a few other very identifiable hubs of it. Out of this sprang both Anthony Fleur's fake presuppositional atheism, and came a movement of so-called scientists and scientific naturalists who called themselves skeptics. Starting with Carl Sagan is the most famous and prominent one of them in the and if you go read the Ethical Skeptics, he's got a ton of the history of it. He's got a ton of examples of it. But the skeptics were an ideological group committed to the proposition that everything has a natural explanation and that there is nothing supernatural. That and they were closely aligned with progressive Marxist globalist politics. They simply were. This is history. This isn't even casting aspersions. That's true. And for a little while, they did seem to have some impressive results. But in reality, their skepticism was always arbitrary, always to the atheist position, always to the there is no supernatural position, which, by the way, isn't even rationally defensible. But the assumption that there is nothing, that there is nothing supernatural, the presumption that modern Western methods of science and material science are the only way that we make human progress. And all of that fits in well with commie propaganda. I'm sorry, it does, with Marxist thinking. And the skepticism most people have been fed is fake and phony. It's a list of things you're supposed to be skeptical of. Now, you can be skeptical of anything you want, but I mean, literally, there's an identifiable list of the things you're supposed to be skeptical of: God, religion, supernatural claims, ghosts, quite a few other things, which you may not believe in.
Traditional morality, the institution of marriage, the traditional role of men and women.
Yes.
Most particularly the belief in private property, particularly for those guys.
Yeah, the belief in private property, skeptical of the idea that countries are real, that nations are real, that ethnicities are real, skeptical of the idea that men or women are different, skeptical of even all kinds of little things, like skeptical of homeopathy, which I don't endorse, but it's like they're obsessed with it, like it's dangerous somehow, obsessed with debunking astrology, obsessed with, they have a list of things you are supposed to be skeptical of, and if you are not skeptical of them, they will imply or state outright that you are deluded or a science ignoramus, or there's something wrong with you. But their list is always entirely arbitrary, and it frequently goes to, frankly, whoever's paying them. Because people like Michael Shermer and Sam Harris will be skeptical. Quite a few professional skeptics will be skeptical for cash for anything you want. And if anybody doubts I can do this, that skepticism really truly is this arbitrary, I'll tell you a little secret. I argue with atheists all the time. It makes them insane. They hate me, even when I'm not mean. Although sometimes I am, because I get mean back to mean people, and I don't suffer fools well. Sorry, I'm old and cranky. I claim old man privilege. But in reality, what I do is cheap. You know what I am? I'm skeptical of atheists, and I'm skeptical of every proposition they make. And it really upsets them.
One of the reasons why I became a theist is that after being an atheist for all my adult life and being a vituperative, crusading, proselytizing atheist, I began to lose faith in my faithlessness, because it was just another faith proposition. To say there is no God is a faith proposition.
Yep. And to say there's no evidence, actually to say there's no evidence of God is not even a faith proposition. That's a ludicrous claim that cannot be sustained by any rational person.
What you have to say if you're an atheist is you have to say, I acknowledge the evidence exists, but I don't place any credence in it. I don't have any faith in it. I just assume it's all the matrix. It's all false. It's all a lie. whatever it is that disagrees with my conclusion has to be false.
And I can demonstrate the cheapness of it on something simple, like I don't know. Let me just be skeptical of Mr. Wright for a minute or two. Do you believe in the Bang Theory, sir? Big Bang Theory, sir?
I believe the Big Bang Theory explains things better than the steady state theory, but I don't. But I don't really believe it or disbelieve in it. I think it fits the standard model better than the steady state theory. Yes. For one thing, the steady state theory requires you to make matter out of nothing, which seems to violate a fundamental assumption of the scientific theory. So, I'm not trying to play with you. Yes, I believe in the Big Bang Theory.
All right, okay. I'm just going to skeptic your belief. You see, you just gave me all these qualifiers. This is a game. Tell me you fully believe in the Big Bang Theory and have no doubts about it. Just say it.
I'll have to pretend I'm someone else who's less skeptical than I am. Yes, I believe in the Big Bang Theory fully.
Okay. How do you know? Who told you?
I take it on faith that the astronomers who have deduced this theory are correct.
See, you just made an admission right there. So you believe the astronomers?
I take it on their authority. Yes.
I see. Yes, and
I haven't done the observations myself.
Can you actually do any experiments for me right now to demonstrate the Big Bang Theory, sir?
Right now, negative.
Do you think you ever would be able to in your lifetime? Do you have the math skills? Do you have the equipment?
Negative.
Okay, could you explain this to a group of, let's say, graduate students in physics? Can you demonstrate it sufficiently for them?
No, but I can explain it in a science fiction story sufficiently for an audience that's unfamiliar with it.
So, in fact, sir, your belief in the Big Bang Theory is entirely faith-based, is it not?
Yes, I take it on the authority of the witness.
There you go.
See, the problem with playing the game with me is that I'm a lawyer. I expect rational people to believe a witness in the witness box if they don't have a good reason to believe he's lying. So I am not now and never have been a worshiper of science. So, because I use skepticism correctly, which is to say, I believe in this because I believe in the underlying theory, and I assume the people who have done these measurements, Hubble and so on, are not lying to me. But is that taking on authority? Yes, it is. Do I have some reason to believe the authority is good? Yes, I do. If a guy told me the sun was hollow and he said that he had performed an experiment to show it, I'd say that doesn't fit in with the standard model. Show me. And if he couldn't show me, if he said he was taking on the authority of some other authority, I'd have to inquire after that authority. But 90%, if not 99% of everything we believe in life is taken on some authority or the other. When I tune in the radio to hear the weather report, I'm listening to the authority of the weatherman because he's studied the matter and I haven't.
Yeah.
But if someone asks, but if I correct someone on a legal matter, that's something where I have studied and they haven't. See? So
right. Exactly. Although I can be skeptical, you have no law degree. Prove it.
Certainly, you can be skeptical. Obviously, I can't prove it over the internet.
Well, that's okay. When I get your diploma, I'll just say it's fake.
What's your standard of proof? Yeah, there we go.
I'll just keep going and say, well, this looks like.
That raises a very interesting point. As a professional philosopher, I have to warn you that there's no philosophical or real world question that you can ask where by merely doing the bright child's behavior of asking why, you eventually will drive a person back on his assumptions. You'll get to a point where there's no line of reasoning where you can't get to a point where the guy can't answer the question. That's true for all theories, both wise and unwise, both old and new.
That's right.
So the mere fact that you can eventually find what an arbitrary assumption or an assumption on faith does not invalidate anything. Because what honest skepticism is not trying to do is prove that everyone has premises in their arguments. The nature of logic requires you to have a premise, because without a premise, you can't get to a conclusion. But the nature of honest skepticism is to say, what's the connections leading me from my assumption to my conclusion? How well does it hang together? And how well does the conclusion fit with the real world that I'm seeing with my eyes? How well does it fit with what other people are telling me about the world? See, that's honest skepticism. Yeah. So if I'm skeptical of the news, which I am, I'm intensely skeptical of the news.
Good Lord.
I don't expect other people to be as skeptical as I am, because I used to be a newspaper man. I used to work in the field. So I know how these decisions are made, and most people don't.
Oh, good Lord, yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So my skepticism has some weight to it, but I can't necessarily show someone else my lifetime of experience in the news business to make them wary of things that I'm wary of. or to justify my suspicions to them. But neither does it prove anything to prove that you can ask me a series of questions until I can't find an answer, because I can do the same to you or to anyone. The same thing with the Big Bang. I'm assuming Hubble was correct when he said that distant galaxies were receding from us. Excuse me, he didn't even say that. He said there was a redshift. I've never actually taken the spectroscopic measurement of a star in my life. I don't even know how to do it. I know how to measure.
I have a friend who's a Christian and an astrophysicist who would probably come on and show us if we wanted. She used to be an atheist, and she figured out there's a God too. She's an actual astrophysicist.
The reason why
take her word on it.
But the reason why we trust her, and the reason why I trust astronomers generally, is not a bit of scientific reasoning, but a bit of legal reasoning. Because everyone in the back of his mind or in the front of his mind, okay, says, does the witness have a reason to lie? Is the witness under any pressure, or is there anything at stake, such as his professional reputation, that would make him unwilling to tell the truth? Is there any confirming evidence? Do I have other witnesses who will also confirm it? So if I can get astronomers from the United States and China and Borneo and Europe to all confirm that more distant stars have a greater redshift, then I can take that on authority with some confidence.
Yes.
But it's not apodectic knowledge. It's not like saying twice 2 is 4. That falls out of the definition. It's not true by definition. It's something I believe. But I could give an account for my belief. But I can do the same thing for my religious belief. Yes. The reason why I believe in Christ is because a number of people saw him, and because the resulting history that I'm familiar with doesn't make sense if that was a fraud.
Yeah.
I mean, name me the other fraud in history where a guy pretended to be God and it overthrew an entire empire peaceably and changed the entire society. Just tell me who else has done that. If it's something men can do, you would think they would do it at least, I don't know, once a century? Once every 200 years?
This also gets something, and maybe we'll get lost in the weeds if we do too much of this. Maybe we'll do a show on this next week or in a future week, which is the use of logical fallacies. Because one of the things I've found among young people, especially among young men who think being skeptical is how you look smart, they also just throw out random names of fallacies that don't apply.
Oh, I love it when people do that to me, because I know what those fallacies actually mean, and they don't, and they misuse it.
For example, they will like to say argument from authority fallacy when you cite an authoritative figure. And they will, and it's like, dude, really?
It's only argument from authority if you are relying on the authority and nothing else for the truth of the proposition. If you say, because X is an authority in the field, therefore it's true. But see, that's the problem with the difference between logical thinking and legal thinking. To a lawyer, putting an expert witness on the stand and saying, dear doctor, are you or are you not an astronomer? And he says, I'm an astronomer. How many years have you been teaching school? I've been teaching 20 years. How is there a redshift for more distant stars? Yes, there is. I've measured it myself. I was at Palomar Observatory and measured it. Okay, that guy is an authority. What your logic hounds are unaware of is what they should be doing is trying to impeach the witness.
Right. Via what you might call, by the way, an ad hominem, except an ad hominem fallacy is when you attack the person in a way that has nothing to do with the matter at hand.
Negative.
An actual attack on the person. I'm sorry, what?
It's the opposite.
I'm sorry.
An ad hominem fallacy is the fallacy for saying, because X is a bad man and X believes Y, therefore Y is false. Right. Merely insulting someone or even slighting them during a conversation is not ad hominem. Right. And merely pointing out and trying to say that witness is not reliable is not ad hominem, because then the question is whether or not the witness is reliable. Yeah. The question is, Hitler owned a dog, Hitler was a bad man, therefore owning a dog is a bad man. That's ad hominem.
Yes, it's as a fallacy. By strict, attack the person. Yes, you can attack a person, but that's not necessarily a fallacy. John Wright here just claimed he was an astrophysicist. I know that's a lie. That would be an ad hominem. Well, he didn't do that, so that's a bad example. That's the kind of thing. It would not be a fallacy, for example, to say that person on the witness stand has been known to perjure themselves multiple times in the past. We cannot trust them now.
Because it goes to the credibility of the witness, or it goes to his reputation in the community for honesty, or if you can pull up a reason to disbelieve him based on some motive he might have, like saying he's the mother of the defendant.
And that you could call that an ad hominem of sorts because you're attacking the person, but it's not a fallacy.
It's not a fallacy if you're trying to answer the question: is that person reliable? Is his testimony to be relied upon?
Yeah.
Now, but if you say, but it is a logical fallacy to say, everyone who doesn't believe in, I don't know, pick a topic, IQ tests, is a racist, or maybe the opposite makes them a racist. I forget which.
You believe in IQ tests, you're a racist.
If you want to lower taxes, I'll use that one because that one was delivered at me. Back a few years ago, I thought it would be a wise idea to lower taxes. I was accused of being a racist for believing we should lower taxes. Got that?
Mm-hmm.
And the conclusion they said is, therefore, we should not lower taxes. Now, if they only wanted to conclude, as a matter of logic, therefore, we should not listen to his testimony on whether or not we should take him on authority as to his knowledge as a tax lawyer, because I have done tax work in the past. I was not very good at it, but I did it. That's a different question. But if I'm not asking you to take me on authority, if I'm presenting an argument, a logical argument to you that I want you to investigate on your own, I'm just the messenger at that point. You don't. No matter what you know about me, it doesn't mean anything. I could have heard the argument from Gandhi, or from Buddha, or Muhammad, or from the AI that rules Jupiter. And if the argument is sound, then show me if the argument is sound and you doubt it, then show me how it's not sound.
Yeah.
If the argument relies upon you taking my word for something, then my credibility is certainly up for an issue because I'm asking you to rely on me. Just see the big difference between a scientific or philosophical argument where you do not ask anyone to rely on you, and something like a newspaper report, or listening to a teacher, or listening to a political figure who is asking you to take him at his word. Do you see the difference between those two things? One is legal reasoning, and the other is philosophical reasoning.
And if you're sitting there going, I don't use either, I use science. Shut up! You just don't know what you're talking about.
Science is a particular application of philosophical reasoning to the question of natural. It used to be called natural philosophy.
Yeah.
It's philosophy is related to the motions of bodies in motion that we see in the universe around us. That's what science is.
Now, let me give you a perfect example of what faux skepticism looks like and how it operates. I have been challenged. One of the most frequent things. Wow, we got more noise there. I don't know what that's about. On the subject of near-death experience. Now, this is fascinating. I've had a number of people say multiple false things about this. First, I've heard people claim that I'm staking my evidence on God and an afterlife on NDEs. No, I'm not. It's one piece of data. We're frequently told that we present no evidence. Actually, we presented this in many other pieces of evidence many times. I have a series I'm working on uploading called Professional Atheists Always Lie. It is, of course, a provocative title. We make it clear in it that the series is talking about the professional skeptics, the professional atheists, because they do always lie. In fact, the professionals in this game know they lie. I will assert that quite clearly, and I can name names and not even be afraid of being libeled because I've got impeccable proof.
You mean not be afraid of being accused of libel?
Oh, I could be accused of it. But on some of these guys, I got enough, I would stand it up in UK libel court, including like Sam Harris.
Yeah.
Here's one we get. So part one is going to be on near-death experience. There's going to be at least a 7 other-part discussing proofs for God and evidence that we have for God. This is just the near-death experience one. Phony skeptics came in immediately on this, and they've done it to me before, including people like this stupid guy he claims to be a science expert, but his degree is in physics, and it's decades old, which means he has no expertise at all, and immediately began impeaching the data.
It doesn't mean he has no expertise at all. It means he's studied in that field.
Right. No particular expertise in medicine.
No expertise in medicine. No, of course not. No.
Or in the relevant research on this, and began immediately making assertions about it that weren't true. And they did so without even looking at it, or they looked at it and then they misrepresented it. It was stunning to watch. Let me just explain that. The first thing in the series is that I got some references that I used and others that I've read and gone through, and some from people I respect who gave me summaries and recommended the books. But the most interesting is the case of Dr. Jeffrey Long, who truly has done over the last almost 30 years, I think, the largest and longest running and most thoroughly peer-reviewed study of near-death experiences that anybody in the world has done. Comprising thousands of cases. You don't get in with him unless you can prove you were brain dead. And by brain dead, we don't mean the fakey, well, he's not going to wake up, so we're going to go ahead and harvest his organs brain death. I mean, you are flatlined, and the only way your heart keeps beating is that they put you on a machine because your brain is off. That's the only kind of brain dead that gets into the study. He's got thousands and thousands of them, and a number of things are true in there. Number one, there's several things I could tell you at once in his findings, which, by the way, use standard medical tracking survey methodologies that they use for psychological and drug evaluations, where they ask you tons and tons of questions. They ask the same question 4, 5, 6 different ways, just to seeing if you're lying or deluded or confused. The same things, and all of this data has been thoroughly peer reviewed by fully qualified professionals. Dr. Long's report is that based on everything they can see, it is absolutely impossible to explain these as electrochemical effects, dreams, delusions, wishful thinkings. It is simply scientifically, medically impossible really to explain them that way. The third most common experience of near-death, one of the most common experiences is going out of body. Another common one is the light in the tunnel, but the light in the tunnel is only the third most common. The second most common is meeting people you know to be dead, and they're very consistent on knowing that they're dead and being able to verify, oh yes, I did talk to this dead person. They're not walking around now, so it wasn't a dream. And the number one is meeting a being they call God, and which is most frequently described, frankly. And you don't find that some Christians who are into near-death experiences I don't know, they may be selective because there's some disagreement, because Dr. Long says the most common, and he's got thousands, they meet a being of infinite light and love that they perceive as God. And actually, it's relatively rare for it to specifically be the person of Jesus Christ or the Buddha or whatever. This is actually troubling to some Christians. And certainly it's also the case that some people go brain dead and never have one of these or never remember one anyway. But the fact is the data is there. It's been thoroughly peer reviewed. It is as credible gets within medical science. It's at least as good as any drug intervention study, and at least as good as any psychological intervention study, and quite a few other studies that we accept as science. And the thing is, what I kept saying over and over again, every so-called skeptic who addresses this data makes it clear he has not even looked at it. And one, the scientist physicist I said did look at it and clearly misrepresented it, but the rest, they make it clear within minutes. They're already skeptical, and they're already throwing out their objections: dreams, delusions, wishful thinking, the dying sparks of a dying brain, electrical snafu, an anti-shock method that nature gave us to comfort us. Well, all of these attempted explain-awayers have been completely and thoroughly debunked by the data. They do not match any of those explanations. And they've ruled it out. And further, and let me add one more thing. Dr. Long also, along with others, has documented that every major medical professional or so-called professional skeptic who's done a book or a speaking tour on near-death experiences saying they're not real and saying that they can be dismissed, all of them have failed to review the peer-reviewed data. All of them have misstated what's in the data. And all of any that have been looked at so far, not a single one of these doctors who says that he can explain away near-death experiences has so much as interviewed one near-death experience patient. Okay.
Let me tell you,
so-called skeptics are not even looking at the data. It's fraudulent what they're doing when they try to explain it away. It's not science, it's ideology.
And
I bring this up.
And they're expecting you to take them on faith. They're expecting you, the listener, to assume that they have reviewed the material and are familiar with the facts, and that they're giving you an honest evidence. Let me tell you a very brief anecdote. My wife is fascinated by near-death experiences and has accumulated an entire bookshelf of such accounts. back when I was an atheist, she presented me with this material, and I read through many of her books. I did not believe it, but I could not possibly bring myself to dismiss it.
Well, and I would just mention, especially because I hear in the background, I argued with her once on Facebook. I think she should review this data because Dr. Long's data does not necessarily match what's in other near-death experience books. So it's worth knowing what his perspective is, especially given how much work he and his group have on it. It's all very interesting. And the thing is that I am actually skeptical of it. But you know
But so was I. But here's the point I'm trying to make. The one reason why I stopped being an atheist is because when I was an atheist, I was an atheist for two reasons. One, my intellect was not convinced that the evidence was sufficient. Two, I was angry at God. I was too proud to admit that there could be an entity to which I should bow the knee. Once I stopped being angry at God, thanks to the writings of G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis, then I started looking at the evidence more honestly, and I found that the argument was not as absurd as I kept telling myself it was. Because I would go through my head over and over again what the arguments against certain positions were, like a litany, like a liturgy, okay? And so when you see something like near-death experiences, and an honest atheist will go, I cannot possibly explain, even if I assume that half these cases are fraudulent somehow, how do I explain the other half? Even of that other half, if I assume half of them are dying embers in a dying brain, then what's my basis for assumption that that's the explanation when I don't have any physical evidence to prove that attitude?
Yeah.
When you look at the physical evidence, it doesn't support this alternate explanations. And then you go, why am I scrabbling to try to find some other explanation? Why don't I just admit there are things in this universe that I do not know? And so that it could be the most reasonable explanation seems to be what it presents itself to be. You see? Now, an honest atheist will say, well, we'll just be open-minded about that. But how many open-minded atheists do you know? If atheism was not a religion, they'd be open-minded about matters of their dogma. But if they have a dogma, then it's a religion.
Watch how to apply skepticism to those who claim that the near-death experiences haven't been medically verified. Get skeptical of that, because yes, they have. That it's wishful thinking. Get skeptical of that. Look, in the data, they looked for all the signs of delusion, of lies, of wishful thinking. In fact, there's stuff in this data that's rather remarkable. Like
the first thing that happened to me after my conversion is that someone accused me of delusion, and I said, "Have you read my medical record? Do you know what happened to me during that week?" And he didn't answer the question. And so I said, "Well, what's your basis for asserting that this is delusion?" I was oriented as to time, place, and person. I was aware of I was able to pass both the legal and the medical test for sanity, and I saw the God that these people just mentioned, the being of infinite light and love. I saw it as plain as I could see my hand in front of my face.
Wow.
So not only, and I wasn't dead, and I wasn't even near dead. So if both living people and dead people see the same thing, let me say one other anecdote. Let me say one other anecdote, and then I'll give you back the microphone. The one other anecdote I want to say is when I was in my college days, I was walking down the street in Annapolis, beautiful country, beautiful city, and over the harbor there was hanging the Goodyear blimp. I assume it was there for some sort of regatta or other event, or some sporting event or something. I walked back to the campus and I said to people, and these people all knew me, and they knew that I never lied, not even about small things. I said I saw the Goodyear blimp, and no one believed me. They said, "No, you didn't." I said, "Well, then what did I see?" They said, "Oh, I don't know, but you didn't see that." And I just thought to myself, I'm glad I didn't see a frickin' UFO.
Yeah.
And these are people who knew me. Okay.
This presentation really got to me too, because I present where you can go to get the original peer-reviewed data, where you can go to buy the book that summarizes it, written by the researcher and a professional writer who helped him put it together as a good book. I direct them to where you can get an extensive interview with the author. And none of these people would look at any of it, and all of them declared that they could dismiss it as wishful thinking, delusions, electrical, chemical effects, and such. Even though, and it's like, at some point you've got to get skeptical of these people. If they make a claim that it's a delusion, they have to prove it. Dr. Long
Yeah.
looked at that, and he dispelled it. It doesn't match the pattern.
Delusions don't happen out of nowhere and for no reason. There are the surrounding indicia. There's automatic evidence you can look at.
Yeah, or what is it, the hypoxia or something, that you suddenly get a rush of endorphins and happy moods and see bright lights, like when you're losing them. Like Pendulette tried to do that and showed that if the blood rushes out of your brain, you get like a tunnel effect and feel really good. And they try and explain that away. They've excluded that from the explanation, up to and including the fact that it's not even close to the most common experience with near-death experience patients. It's about a third of them have that light in the tunnel thing. They are ridiculous efforts of faux skeptics to dismiss the evidence without.
Well, let me tell you what their standard is. Their standard is that if they can come up with an ad hoc explanation, no matter how far-fetched, they would prefer that to the explanation that best explains the facts. So they're abandoning Occam's razor. They're introducing additional assumptions that are not justified. They're relying on evidence that they're inventing out of their own imagination. Who said this about the dying sparks thing? Where is that scientifically measured? Show me the experiment. I'm from Missouri. Show me. Yeah. Okay? These people are not skeptics. I'm sorry. All they are people giving skeptics a bad name. They're skeptics as much as a wolf in sheep's clothing is a sheep. A real skeptic approaches the evidence and puts his emotions aside and puts his preferences aside and sees what the evidence says. And then he goes where the truth leads, painful or not painful. And if he comes to a shock and it's something he didn't believe before, then he lets the evidence decide, not his personal preference. These guys are, in fact, the opposite of skeptics. They're gullible. Do you know how gullible you have to be if I can convince you that it's blood rushing out of your brain when the witness says, "I saw my dead uncle and he talked to me"?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the most fanciful make-believe explanation. The monster ate the cookies from the cookie jar mommy is a more realistic explanation than the brain the brain fume explanation. Give me a break.
On cue, before even learning anything, we had one show up. Keon here says, "Wow, hallucinations are evidence that there are ghosts, pixies, and angels. I should have known that before." Hey, Keon, number one, very typical NPC robot response. Predictable as a stone. We were just talking about that sort of stuff, and then you show up and you say something like that. Please present any evidence at all that scientific evidence that you have, peer-reviewed papers, because I'd like to inspect them if you have them, suggesting that the near-death experiences are hallucinations or that any of this is about ghosts and pixies. Although, ghosts, pixies, and angels. Ghosts and angels, very possible.
Seeing the dead is a ghost.
Yeah, seeing the dead is a ghost. So yeah, actually, given that we have numerous credible, medically verified reports, we know there are ghosts, probably.
Yeah.
Also within the near-death experience, we have very credible and not debunked.
Also, ask him if he's ever seen a blue whale at sea.
Yeah,
and if he hasn't, how does he know there is one?
Yeah, he must take it on faith, right?
He takes it on faith.
Yeah.
I think that blue whales are hallucinations caused by people's desires for large sea mammals.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They hallucinate that they're air breathing rather than fish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You see how skepticism works? See how convenient it is to be skeptical? How easy it is?
Yep.
How lazy it is? I'm a guy who's skeptical for a living, okay? As a newspaper guy and as an attorney, this is actually my bread and butter. This is my work. And you guys can't even lift up a 5-pound weight, and I'm bench pressing tons? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Get
very,
real.
very weak, Keon. You think that made you sound smart, young man? I'm sorry.
No.
It makes you sound like an idiot.
Sound like an idiot. Here's what's going on. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, mostly skeptics are idiots wrapped in the skins of smart people. So they chatter what they think smart people sound like, but they don't understand what the smart people actually think. So they just repeat certain phrases and ideas or certain conclusions. And in order to take advantage of their gullibility, certain people, like the Frankfurt School, present certain idiotic ideas as if they are the conclusions of smart people. And they dress them up in elaborate make-believe words. And please notice how often make-believe words crop up in skeptical language, whereas normal people talk in normal words. Do you see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this? It makes you feel smarter than you are, and it's usually used by stupid people. who are actually embarrassed by, people like me. Now, I would say that as an ad hominem attack, but it's not. It's just an insult. I'm just insulting the guy because he's a jerk. Because he didn't give an argument. All he did was utter an insult.
Yep. In order to virtue signal to others how smart an atheist he is, and he won't be fooled by no scientific data that nobody has successfully debunked.
That's right.
Let me tell you something. Understanding science and understanding skepticism. Everybody talks. I'm not a Big Bang. I don't disparage the Big Bang. I more or less assume it's probably true. But I would point out that the guy who formulated the Big Bang Theory, his name is Georges Lemaitre, a Catholic priest, by the way, and a believer in God, who was inspired by the Bible when he did the Big Bang Theory. He himself, Georges Lemaitre, go ahead and look him up, never said that the theory was even true. In fact, there was at least a time a pope tried saying this Big Bang Theory is proof of God, and Lemaitre himself said you cannot do that.
No, he's right.
This is just a theory, and this proves nothing.
Pope's wrong. I mean, sorry, I hate to say it, but if the Pope was talking about mundane matters, Lemaitre's right, because all the theory does, what a scientific theory is trying to do is trying to explain the most number of facts with the least number of explanations, so you can anticipate what's going to happen next the most accurately.
God is the most rational explanation for a Big Bang. Don't get me wrong.
Sure, but he's also the most rational explanation for a steady state theory too, because who is making all the additional matter energy that is coming into an ever-expanding universe?
Yeah, the guy who gave us Big Bang never claimed, he didn't even claim it was true. Literally, he never claimed it was true, let alone that it was the big discovery of the ages. He was actually a fairly humble man who published it in a fairly small journal and died a fairly humble life, and then got his record erased by people who declared that the Big Bang had been proven and there was no God and a bunch of other bull crap.
Now the Big Bang does cause problems for some skeptics, because when you ask them what conditions, since nothing comes from nothing, since there cannot be a causeless cause, what caused the Big Bang? They either have to say it caused itself, which is something science cannot allow under the assumption that science operates under.
Yep.
Or they have to say there was an uncaused first cause that was not a natural cause, because everything, including time and space, came out of the Big Bang. All of nature came out of the Big Bang. So there's no time before the Big Bang any more than there's a place more northerly than the North Pole. But there is a reason why there's something rather than nothing. And whatever that reason is, it can't be a natural reason. Therefore, QED. It's got to be a supernatural reason by process of elimination. Now,
I saw
that argument, I would lay at the feet of any skeptic. Be as skeptical as you want, and tell me where the error in the argument is.
Yeah. For example, you've seen it tried. I've seen two people try it, and they both should have been shellacked. The one who should have been most shellacked was Lawrence Krauss, his book, A Universe from Nothing. Any competent, he would never have dared publish that under peer review. To multiple scientists, physicists, more accomplished than him, it says all he's doing is abusing languages and playing word games there. There's no science in that.
I would like to sell him a bridge in Brooklyn, because I can fly there by yanking on my bootstraps with enough force to propel me. Because if something can come from nothing, if I can have an uncaused first cause or a reaction without propulsion, then why can't I fly around by yanking on my bootstraps? It's ridiculous. And if it's no, it's worse than that. If it's true, there's no such thing as science. If it's true, then effects arise with no cause, and there's no point in studying anything then.
Yeah. No, Lawrence Krauss was actually literally and deliberately, I would contend, twisting the language so that what sometimes physics call nothing, i.e. a quantum wave function in an indeterminate state, more or less, that's not nothing. That's not actually nothing. A quantum wave function is not nothing.
Yeah.
So even if it all came out of one big quantum wave function, that's not actually nothing. Lawrence Krauss lied, but all professional atheists lie. I'm going to repeat that too. All professional atheists lie. Lawrence Krauss lies about science. The cleverest I saw was when Stephen Hawking, he really thought he could get everything in the universe explained as a natural action of gravity from the Big Bang onward. That it all gets down to gravity. It was a real stretch, and it was a real try. And he failed to demonstrate that this was
gravity.
Possible.
Gravity. According to the book he himself wrote, called The First 3 Seconds, gravity didn't exist as a separate force from the strong and weak nuclear force or the electromagnetic force. It was all one supersymmetrical force in the very beginning.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how I was going to get it to be gravity, and what's the gravity going to be gravitating at the 0 point of time space, at the origin point?
Changed his mind or something, because it's been a while since I've read it, but he was basically saying, yeah, the action of gravity will eventually make this happen.
He's a much better physicist than I will ever even dream of being, but I'm a better philosopher than he is because he apparently hasn't studied it.
Well,
he's making a tyro mistake. He's making a simple beginner's error.
And you got to actually wonder how good of a physicist is he actually. I mean, he's dead, and it's rude to speak ill of the dead, but in fact, his entire life, it was nothing but a theoretical physicist, which means all he did was think about things and write.
I would not disparage his work on black holes, for example. I don't know. I don't.
But I would note to you that he did not discover black holes. He was
that's not what a theoretical physicist does.
And he didn't. Right.
Oh, he didn't barber my hair either because he's not a barber. Theoretical physicists, what they do is they work out the mathematical implications of various possible physical theories.
Right, and he took the position that black holes had to exist. People thought black holes existed before he thought they existed, and people had dismissed black holes as being impossible.
What he did is draw out certain implications from the idea that no one else drew out. So it's you can't disparage what he did just because he's makes a philosophical error when he's speculating outside his field. Within his field, his name is certainly worthy of respect.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of physicists who think he's overrated too. But
but that's easy to say. Anyone's overrated if they're rated a 10 and they're only a 9.
Well,
so what? Yes, I would say that Star Wars is overrated because how come so many people like it? Not as many people like it as could like it. What does that mean? What does that mean?
We're getting a lot of noise from your side. We hear your whole family, I think, kitchen or something.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. The only thing I would say is I would predict for you that Stephen Hawking will never win a Nobel Prize because he never did anything Nobel worthy in his entire life. He is a very good science popularizer. He did some good work predicting that black holes would exist and was vindicated by that by experimental physicists. But by experimental guys, but that's his main claim to fame. He didn't come up with the idea. He didn't actually provide any actual proofs or any experimental data.
But again, that's not his job because he's a theoretical physicist. So you're disparaging him for doing what he was meant to do. What you're saying is nonsense.
Is he a scientist?
And it's making you look like an idiot.
How is it making me look like an idiot to say?
Because you're disparaging my barber for not being able to tune my piano. That's not his job.
Let's just leave it at that experiment, like a scientist does. I have to actually mute you. That is. But I did. No, it did stop when you muted yourself. Okay, I muted the wrong person. The only thing I would say is that a lot of these guys in skeptic land talk as if scientists prove things. And really all Stephen Hawking ever theorized things.
Now, if you want to make fun of them for their false belief about what scientists do, I'm entirely on board with that. I'm 100% on board with that. Scientists who work with the model to try to make the model fit the facts better and then experimenters go out to look at the facts and see how they fit into the model. And it's a back and forth process. It's an ongoing organic process.
Right.
Okay. Right. So I'm not going to disparage the theoretician because he's not the astronomer who's actually looking up into the sky with a telescope to his eye. Nor am I going to disparage the guy with the telescope. What I will disparage is the science worshiper, and even some scientists can be science worshipers.
Oh,
I once engaged for 3 years with a physicist who, as far as I know, was an honest to goodness physicist who didn't know what empiricism was or what its limitations were, because he wasn't taught that. He was taught about subatomic interactions and their energy levels and so on and so forth.
That is staggeringly common nowadays. I run into people, even with PhDs, to say, I got a PhD in physics or whatever, and they are completely clueless on the philosophy of science. And they don't even know what empiricism is. They can't, they don't,
yeah.
It is actually ridiculous sometimes. And they will make assertions that they can't back up. Just like Hawking making his ridiculous, which were really just philosophical assertions he was making about.
Right.
And
he was using his authority as a scientist to make absurd philosophical assertions about something that he had not thought through the implications of. It was embarrassing.
It was, or he had, yeah, exactly. And he was made a big deal out of by making statements, philosophical statements, completely outside of his own area of competence.
Oh, if you want to say that people criticized him for that, I will agree with that. And it also got him headlines. I mean, it got him newspaper headlines and stuff where not for his work in physics. You know. What was the quote that I said at the before we came live? And you wanted me to remember it and repeat it during our podcast here. Now I can't remember what I said.
Oh dear, it was very clever too. I wanted to repeat it, and I don't remember what. You did have a good line about skepticism, I think. But the bottom line, well, you know what? I'm going to go back to recommending the site of the Ethical Skeptic. Now, he's a very long-winded writer, and he's got a lot there. But he really documents all. I mean, he's an actual working scientist, and he is also very anonymous because he knows the skeptics will come for him, because he just goes on and on demonstrating all the fake assertions that so-called skeptics make with a capital F that they cannot back up. He also routinely, just purely on science, just shows, you know, the assumptions that they're making that are false, the presuppositions they're making that are false, and he even documents how some of them are obviously on the getting paid to do the stuff they do, because it does get back to it. If you're not, an honest skeptic does what Mr. Wright here has suggested, which is an honest skeptic is somebody who's testing his own presuppositions or testing somebody else's presuppositions to see if, you know, what we're assuming is correct actually correct. And then you do tests. That's an honest way of doing skepticism. To say that you are merely skeptical of claims because they're unproven to you, that's almost a non-statement. It's like, well, what proofs have you looked for, and why have you dismissed them? That's the honest question.
I have to say, with every the reason why I regard most atheists these days as a disgrace to the forces of evil, and nowhere near up to the standard that I used to adhere to when I was an atheist, is I will ask them, what is your standard of proof? And none of them, not one so far in my life, has ever given me an answer.
They all run. Oh, I have gotten this one, a peer-reviewed paper. I'm like, what? You know, and they'll ask for a peer-reviewed paper on something that you wouldn't even get a peer-reviewed paper on. It's
sure for a scientific or an empirical question, yeah.
Or I've had them say, "Give me empirical proof," and I say, "How do I give empirical proof of something that's not physical?" And they won't answer. They just laugh and say, "Then you have no proof." It is. You're absolutely right. Basically, they're crumble bombs. They're stumble bombs. They're clowns.
But their statement themselves is non-empirical. The statement I require this as my proof is not a statement you can prove by measuring a physical object. Mm-hmm. Just ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I mean, even in modern science, in classical science, which was called natural philosophy, you would say that definitionally something without a physical proof would be out of science, because you're not measuring something physical.
Yeah.
But the usage has changed over the years, because you're not measuring much physical when you measure whether or not a treatment for depression worked. Because you're ultimately measuring, does the person report that they feel better?
Well, you're not measuring anything. You're counting how many times out of how many tests it seems to have had the result you're expecting.
Yeah, but even like, let's say
people use the word science. People use the word science these days to mean any disciplined thinking.
Yeah.
But they exclude things like ontology and ethics and politics and metaphysics and so on and so forth. Almost as if the entire modern effort was aimed at eroding the dignity of metaphysics so that they don't have to address these deeper topics. Everything material is based on something immaterial. The concept of the material measurements we make are based on the immaterial concept of measurement.
Right.
That's a concept. It has no weight, shape, or form. It doesn't exist in time.
Well, there's some stuff there is some stuff that you could call science in the field of psychology. Mostly, it's certainly not science in the classical sense, because you're not measuring anything empirical most of the time. Same would be true for most of the entire field of psychiatry. You could say, well, they give drugs, so the drugs have predictable effects. But even with the predictable effects of drugs, hey, John, I just took a drug and I'm not depressed anymore. What's my physical proof of that? What's my physical proof of that? I don't have any. I just told you I'm not depressed anymore.
My big pet peeve as a lawyer is that people confuse legal thinking with scientific thinking. If the witness says he's not depressed and you don't see any other indicia to show that he's lying, then you can take it for granted that he's not depressed. And that's a fact.
What's your proof? Give me proof.
Exactly. So the skeptics are skeptical about everything except for the things that they want to be skeptical about. They have this list. They have this checklist of things, of issues they don't want to deal with, that they want to feel comfortable about, and they want to feel safe in their unquestioning assumptions. So they use skepticism as a sword to drive away any questions that might question their assumptions. But a real skeptic looks at all the assumptions: the assumption there's a God, the assumption that there's no God, and see which one falls out with the better answer.
Yeah. At some point, and that's really all it gets down to. I could rant forever on how much I hate Penn Jillette and how much I hate James Randi. Now, as a Christian, I'm not supposed to hate people, I guess, so I'll just ask God to forgive them for me until I can. But
you can hate the lies they tell, especially when they use the prestige of science to
fatten their own
to lend credence to an argument that's not scientific. And I do think James Randi is wise to warn investigators of psychic phenomenon to be aware of how frauds work, because there's frauds. There's false Christs as well as real Christs,
Sure.
Which, by the way, if anything, is a proof that Christ is real, because no one bothers to counterfeit Confederate money anymore. They only counterfeit the money that's still in circulation.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot
But
what
he also,
James. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, but James Randi doesn't abide by his own standards.
No, he doesn't.
He assumes the supernatural explanation is false, and then he doesn't rigorously follow through with it.
No.
Because what do you do with near-death experiences then, Mr. Randi? How come none of those people have gotten your famous prize that you carry around in your pocket?
Yeah, because he will not consider it sufficient proof. He will arbitrarily declare it's not sufficient evidence, no matter how much he's given. By his same standards, he could not even prove the existence of an effective cure for depression, but never mind. And when I say I don't like the guy, I was a big fan for years. I feel like I got sucked in by a flim-flam artist. And I got sucked into flim-flam artist James Randi.
You and me both, brother.
By his younger protege, the fraudulent verbal and visual misdirected con artist Penn Jillette, who is a skeptic for cash, who on his old show Bullshit would literally take money to be skeptical of anything his sponsors wanted him to be skeptical of.
You and me both, brother. I used to be a fan of the Amazing Randi, and after I became religious and I realized that what he's selling was snake oil. And then I was a chump. You see, I wasn't skeptical enough to be skeptical about the skeptics. I was a chump because I wanted to be, because that's the way it works.
His attempt to debunk astrology was the most unconvincing thing I ever saw. And I'm not even big into astrology. I've seen enough to convince me there's something to it, and I don't want to play with it anymore because you get lost in there. But it was one of the most unconvincing things I ever saw, even as an atheist. And I've seen it in countless other things. I've seen it in countless things Penn Jillette does. It's verbal misdirection, okay? It's flim-flam. It is what Penn would call bullshit. Their skepticism is entirely arbitrary, and they will be skeptical of something for you if you pay them enough.
Yeah.
And that's been their career. And it's once you get skeptical, stop being impressed with them and turn your skeptic guns on them, they will run or they will get angry. I even had one defender of James Randi say, "Leave an old man alone, just being mean to an old man." Considering the old fraud?
Considering that Randi himself has mocked flim-flam artists who tried to use that as a defense when they were trying to flim-flam people out of there. Don't get me wrong. As a faithful Christian, I regard tarot card reading and crystal ball reading and other people who ask for money in return for psychic powers to be either guilty of simonry if they're on the side of the angels, or guilty of diabolism if they're on the side of the devils. So I have no great sympathy for the people that Randi's attacking. But he's not doing what he's saying to it. He's also a flim-flam artist. Like you said, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of his skepticism. I think his skepticism is a fraud. I think it's a pose. I think it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. I think it is a gullible wolf in the snow white clothing of a philosophical skeptic like me. a guy who's actually a skeptic.
I'm virtually willing to bet money that if we dug into his background, we would find he came from a broken home or had a very bad relationship with his father. Because he listened to him, and he's got that clenched rage of the guy who still hasn't gotten over his daddy issues. I'm sorry, he really doesn't have that. Pendulette doesn't, but James Randi does.
Like I say, speaking as an ex-atheist, most atheists are atheists because they're mad at God, or because they're too proud to bow. That's the driving reason. However, whatever their intellectual problems are can usually be answered if they're willing to have an honest conversation with an intellectual answer. But they claim to be the masters of reason. But if they're the masters of reasons, then why are they so gullible? Why are they willing to believe in brain sparks but not in ghosts?
I was the other way.
Did you see what I'm saying? What makes the one more fantastical than the other?
Right. Exactly. I was the other way, and I was a more neurotic atheist. It was almost like I disbelieved because it sounded too good to be true. And I didn't want to be fooled because I was terrified of being fooled. And then when I decided there must be a God, I was still filled with doubt on the question for years. I struggled with it. There were even times when I was like, will someone please explain to me why you believe in this? Because I'm not getting it. And I really was lost. I'm giving you that straight up.
Sure.
Long time. Please help me. I don't understand why you believe this. That's kind of where I was at one point. I had a mental block. But there was an emotional component, no question, just one I wasn't that conscious of. Some of it was rage at my dad. A lot of it was self-doubt.
But you said to me that professional atheists always lie.
They do. Every single
I agree. Because basically I don't know, I'm not speaking from my experience. I'm taking you as an authority because you've looked into the matter. Okay. Taking you on faith.
A lot of them, yeah.
So, but the emotional turmoil that drives people to atheism is real and is a major effect. And it's like looking at how come if you looked at a bunch of angry drunks and you found out they were all angry, you'd begin to think that the intellectual difficulties that they're raising are a side effect, not the real effect of what's going on. But notice that is the argument, that is the accusation in the mouths of almost every atheist I've ever met. Is they say, you believe what you want to believe because you lack intellectual integrity. You are letting your emotions and your passions drive you to a false conclusion because it's what you want to believe. To which I go, no, sir, it's not what I want to believe. And even if I wanted to believe it or not, I mean, a thing doesn't become false merely because it's too good to be true. I'm happily married to my beautiful wife. It's too good to be true. Okay. That doesn't mean I'm not married. It doesn't mean I hallucinated her. You see the argument? They're accusing others of what they themselves are actually secretly worried about, that their own emotions are driving them to a false conclusion.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, is an ad hominem attack in a pristine form, because I am actually saying that they're suffering from a personality flaw, which is the reason why we should not believe their conclusion. So it's not logically true, and I'm not offering it as a logical argument. I'm offering it as expert witness, expert testimony. I can speak as an ex-atheist and I've spoken to many atheists. This is a pattern I've detected.
I'll just repeat it again. They all get mad when I mention it. No, it's not 100% of it, but it's in excess of 90% of them have father issues. It is very clear that it's either rage or fear that drives them, or both.
I've also noticed a lot of them are really sweet on things like Buddhism and other religions, just as long as there's not a father figure involved.
What's even sicker about that?
Not all of them by all means. Not all of them by all means, but a lot of them.
By all means. I would say that one of the things that's sick, and we don't have time for this, but there's a fake version of Buddhism going around, which was crafted by cultural Marxists. They call it Theravada Buddhism or whatever, and they claim it's a Buddhism that doesn't really believe there's any afterlife or any spiritual forces at all, and that these are just ideas that we have in our heads that we work with, and they're fake. They're not real Buddhists. Real Buddhists do not think that way at all. They're a way to pitch a religion at an atheist so that they can stay atheist. It's fake Buddhism. Yeah. And it's on the internet.
They should call their new religion Zen atheism. Wouldn't that be funny? Anyway, we're past time. It's like
are not to the end of our time. We are. Oh, in fact, what time did we start? Oh my God, we went 1 hour and 20. I thought I was doing good time. My apologies, everybody.
It was such a good time.
It was a good time.
I'm skeptical of the clock now.
I'm skeptical of the clock. How do we really know that? does time really exist? Can you prove that time exists to me? Go ahead.
I can't measure it on a balance scale. I can't take its temperature. It's not a physical object.
It must not exist then. You can't prove time exists.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, this is fun. Maybe we'll get more into the logical fallacy stuff next week because I mean, really, I got a list. I've been accused of almost every logical fallacy on the book, except for one, by the way, by atheists. There's one fallacy that nobody has ever, no atheist has ever accused me of.
Argumentum ad noetium?
No. Actually, do you know this one? The Bulverism? Because it is actually atheists' favorite argument, I find.
That term was coined by C.S. Lewis. It's a particular form of ad hominem. But,
yes, the protection of an argument on the basis of the character, motives, or identity of the one making it, rather than its logical soundness or the validity of its assumptions. It's every time you say you're only doing that because
you're a white male.
Because you're a white male. Because
you're only saying it because you're Christian. You're only saying that because you've got a job. You're only saying that because your heart is filled with hate. You're only saying that because you're a bigot. That's the only argument I ever hear from leftists these days on any topic.
Yeah, and it's 2/3 of what comes out of the atheists and skeptics who come through. It's 2/3 of what comes out of their mouth. If it's not just ridiculous ranting about fairies and unicorns and imaginary friends, it's and throwing.
Well, let's ask a real skeptical question. Use your science and prove to me there's no pixies, Mr. Skeptic. Show me the experiment. Tell me the time and date of the first experimenter who proved the non-existence of fairies.
Also, please present evidence that belief in God is a delusion. I want to see the peer-reviewed papers which establish that this is a delusion. I want to inspect them. All right, everybody, This has been fun. We'll be back next week. We're here every night. Tomorrow we've got at least a nerd stream going on. Wednesday night we are bringing in Rabbi Oliver to discuss the provocative topic of anti-Jewish conspiracy theories, real or imagined. I think people are going to enjoy listening to Rabbi Oliver because he says it's absolutely okay to criticize Jews and it's absolutely okay to criticize Israel. And he doesn't even like Zionism. And so I've been hearing a lot of stuff about Jews and what supposedly Jews do or don't do. We're going to have fun talking to Rabbi Oliver about that. We've got some exciting debates coming up in the actually this week. We've got some rather famous atheists coming in here to argue, professional atheists who will be arguing with Josh and Andrew Stratelis because I can't stand them. But we've had on, we're going to have Nick Suter, the fairly well-known name, somebody from the, what the heck is it called? Freedom from Religion Foundation will be on. We got a lot going on. So again, if you like our work, please support our work on redpillreligion.com. Drop a dime in the tip jar if you would, or buy something. Go visit sci-fi right.com and buy his stuff, and give us a like, give us a subscribe. God bless everybody.